Blood stained the melting spring snow as the massive grizzly bear paced near the abandoned mining shaft. Her powerful claws, usually deadly weapons against any threat, had proven useless against the metal bars trapping her cubs. For 3 days, she had fought against time and exhaustion, her once pristine brown fur now matted with mud and streaked with her own blood from countless failed rescue attempts. The mountain air carried the frightened whimpers of her cubs from deep within the shaft. Each cry tore at her heart, driving her to throw herself against the rusted barrier again and again. Her shoulders bore deep gashes from squeezing through tight spaces, and her paws were raw from digging. Yet the pain meant nothing compared to the terror of losing her babies. Spring had come early to the mountains, and the abandoned mine entrance had collapsed during the winter thaw. Her cubs, just 4 months old and full of curiosity, had wandered too close while she was teaching them to forage. The rotting wooden supports had given way beneath their weight, sending them tumbling into the darkness below. Only the old metal grating, now partially collapsed, had prevented them from falling deeper into the earth. As the sun rose on the 4th day, the mother bear's movements became sluggish. Exhaustion clouded her mind, and hunger gnawed at her belly. She had not eaten since the cubs became trapped, refusing to leave them for more than a few minutes at a time. Her powerful body, already lean from nursing her cubs through the winter, was reaching its limits. The distant sound of human activity drifted up the mountainside. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat deeper into the wilderness. Humans meant death. Humans meant guns and traps and pain. She had learned this lesson early in life, carrying old scars from close encounters. Yet as another weak cry echoed from the shaft, something shifted in her primitive brain. Maternal love began to wage war against generations of instinctive fear. She had seen humans from afar, watched them solve problems her bare mind could not comprehend. They built structures, moved earth, and wielded tools that could reshape the very mountain. In her desperation, a dangerous thought took root. If her strength could not save her cubs, perhaps human tools could. The mother bear raised her head, tasting the wind. The human scent was stronger now, mixed with wood smoke from a cabin she had always avoided. Moving closer to humans meant risking everything. They might kill her on sight, leaving her cubs to a slow death in the darkness. Yet staying here meant watching them grow weaker until their cries fell silent forever. Nature had not prepared her for this choice. Every lesson of survival told her to protect herself, to flee from humans and live to breed again. But the love for her cubs burned fiercer than any natural law. In that moment, gazing down the mountainside toward the human dwelling, she made a decision that went against every fiber of her being. With one last look at the shaft entrance, she began her careful descent. Each step away from her cubs felt like a betrayal, yet she moved with grim determination. Blood dripped from her wounds, marking her trail in the snow. She was choosing to approach her most feared enemy, gambling her life on the slim hope that a human might understand her need. The mother bear did not know if she was walking to her death. She only knew that she had tried everything else, and her cubs were running out of time. Sometimes, she had learned, a mother must risk everything to save her children. As she moved through the awakening forest, her massive form a testament to both strength and vulnerability. She carried with her the most powerful force in nature, a mother's love. The descent through the mountain forest demanded every ounce of the mother bear's remaining strength. Her massive body, weakened by days without food, moved with uncharacteristic caution through the melting snow. Each step brought her closer to human territory and further from her trapped cubs, their distant cries growing fainter behind her. Morning mist clung to the valley below, partially concealing the hunter's cabin. The mother bear's keen nose detected fresh wolf tracks crossing her path. Under normal circumstances, no wolf pack would dare challenge her, but in her weakened state, she could not risk a confrontation. She altered her course, taking a longer route through dense undergrowth where the wolves would not follow. Her breathing came in labored gasps, visible in the cool spring air. The wounds on her shoulders had begun to stiffen, and dried blood crackled on her fur with each movement. Yet she pressed forward, her determination evident in every careful step. Years of avoiding human settlements had taught her their patterns and territories. Now she used that knowledge not to flee, but to approach. Every few minutes, she stopped to listen, turning her head back toward the mineshaft. The silence between her cubs' cries grew longer each time, pushing her to move faster than safety advised. The mother bear knew that leaving them alone made them vulnerable. Foxes, coyotes, or other predators might be drawn to their distress calls. The thought spurred her forward despite her exhaustion. As she neared the cabin, the scent of human grew stronger. Gun oil, smoke, leather. Each smell triggered waves of panic that she fought to control. Her muscles trembled with the effort of suppressing her instinct to run. A sudden bang from the cabin nearly broke her resolve. She dropped to her belly in the underbrush, heart pounding so hard it shook her massive frame. The hunter emerged from his cabin, axe in hand. The mother bear watched him move to a woodpile, her claws digging deep into the earth as she wrestled with her fear. Every fiber of her being screamed danger, yet the image of her cubs, trapped and weakening, kept her rooted in place. She needed this human to understand, but one wrong move would mean a bullet instead of help. Slowly, deliberately, she rose from her hiding place. The morning sun illuminated her wounds, revealing the cost of her rescue attempts. She stood upright, her full height designed by nature to intimidate, but now she needed to appear unthreatening. The hunter had frozen mid-motion, his hand moving slowly toward the cabin where his rifle waited. The mother bear took one step forward, then another. Her movements were stiff, pain evident in every step. She kept her head low, fighting against generations of ingrained behavior that demanded she either charge or flee. A low whimper escaped her throat, a sound she had never made before humans. The hunter's scent shifted from surprise to fear to confusion. He remained motionless, perhaps understanding that her behavior defied everything he knew about bears. She took another step, then deliberately sat, displaying her bloodied shoulders and the raw flesh of her paws. Time stretched between them like a taut wire. The mother bear waited, every second away from her cubs, in agony she could barely endure. She needed to make him understand. Again she rose, took 2 steps toward the mine shaft, then turned to look at him. The gesture cost her dearly. Turning her back on a human went against every survival instinct she possessed. When the hunter failed to comprehend, she repeated the motion. Step, turn, wait. Step, turn, wait. Each time she moved further from the cabin, hoping he would follow. Her heart thundered in her chest, expecting any moment to hear the fatal crack of a rifle. Yet she continued her desperate pantomime, knowing her cubs' lives depended on this gamble. The sound of approaching footsteps caught her attention. Another human was coming up the trail to the cabin. The mother bear's muscles coiled, preparing to bolt into the forest. For a moment, she seemed to waver between fear and determination. The memory of her cubs' weakening cries strengthened her resolve. She held her ground, though every nerve screamed for flight. This was the moment that would determine everything. One human might listen, but 2 might decide she was too great a risk. As the second human emerged from the forest path, the mother bear made her final, most dangerous choice. She stayed, fighting every natural instinct, gambling her life on the hope that these humans would see past their fear to recognize a mother's desperate plea. The arrival of the second hunter triggered a chain of reactions that would test the mother bear's resolve to its limits. The newcomer immediately raised his rifle, shouting a warning. His companion from the cabin lifted his hands, calling for calm, intrigued by the bear's strange behavior. The mother bear remained seated, her whole body trembling with the effort of suppressing her natural response to flee or fight. Blood continued to seep from her wounds, leaving dark patches in the spring snow. Her eyes, usually fierce and challenging, held an intelligence that caught the first hunter's attention. He had encountered many bears in his years in the wilderness, but never one that behaved like this. The bear's posture spoke of exhaustion and desperation rather than aggression. The second hunter fired a warning shot into the air. The sound echoed through the valley, sending birds scattering from the trees. The mother bear flinched but did not run. Instead, she lowered herself further, pressing her belly into the snow. This display of submission from one of nature's most powerful predators was unprecedented. She knew that making herself vulnerable before armed humans might mean death, but the thought of her cubs gave her courage. Again she rose, moved several steps toward the mine shaft, and looked back at the humans. When they did not follow, she returned, closer this time. Each approach brought her within easier shooting range, yet she persisted. She picked up a fallen branch in her teeth, then dropped it at the edge of the clearing. The gesture was almost pleading, like a dog trying to initiate play, but her eyes held a depth of urgency that spoke of something far more serious. The first hunter took a step forward, his movements slow and measured. The mother bear backed away slightly, maintaining a careful distance. She repeated her motion toward the mountain, this time adding a soft moan that sounded almost like a cry. The sound carried such distress that even the second hunter lowered his rifle slightly, recognizing something profound was happening. Hours of hunting had taught the first hunter to read animal behavior. He noted how the bear favored her right side, how her fur was matted with blood and dirt, not from a fight, but from squeezing through something tight. Most telling was how she kept looking back toward the mountain with obvious anxiety. Bears were intelligent, but this level of deliberate communication was extraordinary. Another warning shot rang out as a third hunter, attracted by the commotion, emerged from the forest. The mother bear stood her ground, though her legs shook with fear and exhaustion. She was surrounded now, yet she made no aggressive move. Instead, she carefully lay down, exposing her throat in the ultimate display of submission. This gesture, more than anything else, convinced the first hunter that something was terribly wrong. Nature had not designed bears to behave this way. Every rule of survival dictated that a bear should either attack or flee when confronted by humans with guns. Yet here was this massive creature deliberately making herself vulnerable, trying again and again to communicate something of desperate importance. The mother bear's next move would break the final barrier. She approached the nearest woodpile and, with careful movements, used her claws to pull out a single log. The control this took to use just enough strength to move the wood without appearing threatening demonstrated remarkable intelligence. She dragged the log a few feet toward the mountain trail, then looked back at the hunters with pleading eyes. In that moment, understanding dawned on the first hunter's face. This bear needed help with something that required human tools. The way she kept trying to lead them up the mountain, her obvious injuries from trying to get through or into something, the desperate persistence in her behavior, all suddenly made sense. The first hunter spoke softly to his companions, explaining his theory. The mother bear watched them intently, reading their body language as they lowered their weapons. When the first hunter took a cautious step toward the mountain trail, her entire demeanor changed. She rose quickly, hope visible in her posture, and took several steps in that direction. She had done it. Against all odds, defying every natural law of survival, she had made humans understand her need. As the hunters gathered a few tools from the cabin, the mother bear fought her final battle against instinct. Every fiber of her being screamed to run while she had the chance. But she waited, trembling with exhaustion and fear. Her cubs' lives depended on these humans following her up the mountain, and she would not fail them now. The journey back up the mountain became a delicate dance between urgency and caution. The mother bear set a pace that challenged her exhausted body, yet remained slow enough for the hunters to follow. Every few steps, she turned to check their progress, her anxiety growing when they fell too far behind. Time was precious, yet she knew rushing might spook them into abandoning their help. Her massive body, once a powerhouse of strength and energy, now moved with visible strain. Blood had begun seeping again from her deeper wounds, leaving a sporadic trail in the snow. The trek uphill taxed her depleted reserves, but the sound of her cubs' cries, growing stronger as they approached, gave her strength to continue. The first hunter, who had understood her plea, kept his companions calm with quiet words of reassurance. The mother bear noted how he maintained a respectful distance, close enough to follow but far enough to show he understood her power. Despite her weakened state, she remained a grizzly bear, capable of killing with a single swipe of her paw. This mutual acknowledgement of each other's dangerous potential formed the foundation of their fragile trust. When they passed through a narrow ravine, the mother bear faced another test of her resolve. The passage forced them to walk closer together, close enough for the human's scent to flood her nostrils with danger signals. Her muscles bunched instinctively, ready to defend herself in the confined space. Yet she forced herself to continue forward, even as the hunter's breathing quickened behind her. A series of distressed squeals echoed down from above, sending the mother bear into a frenzy of worry. She surged forward several steps before catching herself, remembering her need to keep the humans with her. The conflict between her protective instincts and desperate need for help played across her features. She turned back, whimpering softly, her eyes pleading with the hunters to hurry. The physical toll of the past 4 days became increasingly apparent as they climbed. Her movements grew less fluid, each step seeming to require conscious effort. Twice she stumbled on loose rocks, her exhaustion betraying her usually perfect balance. Yet each time she recovered, driven by a determination that transcended her physical limitations. The first hunter watched her with growing admiration, recognizing the incredible sacrifice this proud creature was making. Each time she waited for them to catch up, she exposed herself to potential attack. Every instance she chose to trust rather than flee demonstrated a level of intelligence and maternal devotion that defied conventional understanding of wild animals. As they neared the mine shaft, the mother bear's behavior shifted subtly. Her body language portrayed increasing anxiety, yet also relief at nearly reaching her cubs. The sound of their cries grew clearer, and the hunters finally understood the full scope of the situation. Their pace quickened voluntarily, no longer needing the bear's guidance to know where they were headed. The mother bear's trust faced its ultimate test when they reached a steep section requiring single-file passage. She would have to allow the humans to walk behind her, placing herself in a position of complete vulnerability. For a long moment, she stood frozen, instinct warring with necessity. The cries of her cubs from above made her decision. She began climbing, exposing her back to the armed hunters, gambling everything on the understanding they had developed. This shared moment of trust transformed their unlikely alliance. The hunters, moved by her incredible display of maternal courage, quietly stowed their rifles on their backs, recognizing the gesture of faith she had shown them. The mother bear, sensing this shift, relaxed slightly, her movements becoming more natural despite her exhaustion. As they approached the final ridge before the mine shaft, the mother bear paused. She turned to face the hunters fully for the first time since leaving the cabin. Her eyes, intelligent and desperate, met theirs directly. In that moment, the boundary between wild animal and human blurred. They saw not a dangerous predator, but a mother who had risked everything, broken every natural law, and placed her life in enemy hands to save her children. The cubs' cries grew more excited, sensing their mother's return. The mother bear turned toward the sound, then looked back one final time at her human allies. They had followed her this far, but the hardest part still lay ahead. The rescue would require tools and human ingenuity, but also trust on a level that had perhaps never existed between their species before. The final approach to the mine shaft revealed the full tragedy of the situation. 2 small cubs, their black fur dusty from the collapsed tunnel, huddled together behind the rusted metal grating. Their cries grew frantic at the sight of their mother, paws reaching through the bars in desperate attempts to touch her. The mother bear rushed forward, pressing herself against the barrier, trying to comfort them through the metal. The hunters assessed the situation with growing concern. The mine entrance had collapsed significantly, leaving only a small opening reinforced by old timber supports that groaned under the weight of loose rock. The metal grating, once meant to keep animals out, now trapped the cubs in a space barely large enough for them to move. Years of rust had fused the barrier to its frame, making simple removal impossible. When the first hunter approached with his tools, the mother bear's instincts flared. Her cubs' distressed cries triggered every protective urge in her body. She rose to her full height, a momentary flash of wild fear in her eyes. The hunter froze, tools in hand, knowing these next moments would determine everything. With tremendous effort, the mother bear forced herself to back away, though every muscle in her body trembled with the need to protect her young. The rescue attempt began with careful assessment. The hunters worked to stabilize the crumbling entrance, aware that one wrong move could trigger another collapse. The mother bear watched their every movement, her massive body tense with anxiety. Each time her cubs cried out in fear of the humans, she fought against her natural instinct to charge. Her trust in these former enemies was tested with every whimper and scared squeal. As the hunters started working on the metal grating, an unexpected role emerged for the mother bear. Her cubs, terrified of the humans and the strange sounds of tools, began to panic. Their frightened thrashing risked injury against the sharp metal edges. Understanding the danger, the mother bear positioned herself where they could see her clearly. She began making soft grunting sounds, the same comforting noises she used when they were newborns. Her presence kept them calm enough for the rescue to continue. The work proved more challenging than anticipated. Rust had thoroughly sealed the grating's hinges, requiring the hunters to cut through the metal itself. Each screech of metal against metal set the mother bear's teeth on edge. She paced anxiously, staying close enough to comfort her cubs, but far enough to allow the humans to work. This delicate balance demanded incredible restraint, especially when sparks from the tools flew too close to her precious cubs. A heart-stopping moment came when one of the support beams shifted, sending a shower of rocks into the opening. The cubs screamed in terror, and the mother bear lunged forward instinctively. She caught herself mere feet from the hunters, her powerful muscles quivering with restrained power. The humans had dropped their tools, hands moving toward their rifles, but the mother bear forced herself to back away. In that crucial moment, she chose trust over terror, allowing them to return to their work. Hours passed and exhaustion began to take its toll on everyone. The mother bear's wounds had reopened from her constant movement, leaving fresh blood on the snow. Yet she remained vigilant, alternating between comforting her cubs and watching the rescue progress. Her body swayed with fatigue, but she refused to rest while her cubs remained trapped. The final phase of the rescue proved the most dangerous. The grating had been cut away, but the opening was still partially blocked by debris. The cubs, weak from their ordeal, needed help to climb out. This meant the hunters would have to reach into the shaft, making themselves completely vulnerable to the mother bear. It was the ultimate test of the trust they had built. The mother bear watched as the first hunter lay down on his stomach, reaching into the darkness toward her frightened cubs. Every maternal instinct screamed at her to attack, to drive away this threat to her young. Instead, she pressed closer to the opening, rumbling reassuringly to her cubs. Her presence encouraged them to move toward the hunter's outstretched hands. One by one, the cubs were lifted to safety. Each time a human touched her precious babies, the mother bear's anxiety spiked visibly. Yet she remained steady, understanding that these same hands that had once represented danger were now her cubs' salvation. She fought against generations of instinct, against every natural law that demanded she defend her young from human touch. As the second cub emerged into the sunlight, the mother bear's restraint finally broke. She rushed forward, but not in anger. With infinite gentleness, she gathered her cubs to her, checking them for injuries while keeping one eye on the hunters. The humans backed away respectfully, giving the family space for their reunion. They had witnessed something extraordinary. A mother's love so powerful it had bridged the ancient divide between human and bear. In the fading light of the spring day, the mother bear gently nuzzled her rescued cubs, washing their dusty fur with her tongue. Her massive body curled around them protectively, creating a living barrier between her precious babies and the world. Though her wounds still bled and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, her eyes shone with triumph. Her desperate gamble, breaking every rule of survival, had succeeded. The cubs, weak from their ordeal but otherwise unharmed, pressed against their mother's warm fur. Their earlier terror gave way to soft whimpers of contentment as they nursed for the first time in days. The mother bear endured the pain of their eager feeding, knowing they needed strength for the journey home. Her own hunger and injuries would have to wait. The price of trusting humans had been steep. Her body bore new scars that would never fully heal, testament to her desperate attempts to free her cubs alone. The mental toll might have been even greater, having forced herself to suppress every natural instinct, to expose herself to mortal danger from her most feared enemy. Yet as she watched her cubs grow stronger with each passing moment, she knew she would pay that price again without hesitation. The hunters remained at a respectful distance, witnesses to one of nature's most powerful forces, a mother's love. They had seen something few humans ever would, a wild creature choosing trust over fear, intelligence over instinct. The first hunter who had understood her plea watched the family with quiet amazement. In all his years in the wilderness, he had never seen such a pure display of maternal courage. As strength returned to her cubs, the mother bear faced her final challenge. She needed to lead her family away from this place of trauma, back to the safety of their forest home. Rising slowly, still protecting her cubs with her body, she gazed one last time at the humans who had helped her. Her eyes held no fear now, only a deep awareness that would forever change how she viewed their species. The hunters watched as she guided her cubs into the forest, her movement still stiff with pain, but filled with purpose. They knew this encounter would impact more than just this one family. Word would spread through the hunting community about the grizzly bear who had asked for help, who had demonstrated intelligence and trust that defied everything they thought they knew about wild animals. The mother bear paused at the forest's edge, her cubs tumbling playfully around her legs, their ordeal already fading from their young minds. She turned to look back at the humans one final time, as if cementing this moment in her memory. In that peaceful pause between danger and safety, between trust and wild freedom, she stood as a testament to the incredible power of maternal love. The hunters would return to their cabin that evening, forever changed. They had witnessed something that transcended the natural boundaries between species. A mother's desperate love had broken through centuries of fear and mistrust, creating a moment of understanding that none of them would ever forget. They had seen how love could conquer even the deepest instinctive fears, how it could bridge gaps that nature itself had created. As darkness settled over the mountain, the mother bear led her family to a sheltered den far from the mine shaft. Her wounds would heal, and in time the pain would fade. But the memory of those desperate days would remain, a reminder of what a mother would risk for her children. Her cubs would grow strong under her protection, carrying with them an inherited wisdom about humans that few bears would ever know. The story of the mother bear who trusted humans to save her cubs would be told and retold around hunting cabin fires. It would remind those who heard it that nature's creatures were capable of far more than humans suspected. Most importantly, it would stand as an eternal testament to the courage of mothers everywhere, who would risk everything, defy any obstacle, break any natural law to save their children. In the years that followed, hunters in those mountains would sometimes glimpse a large grizzly bear with distinctive scars, teaching her growing cubs the ways of the forest. She would acknowledge their presence calmly before leading her family away, no longer ruled by blind fear. In this simple gesture lived a legacy of her courage, a reminder that sometimes the greatest act of love is trusting those we were born to fear. If this incredible tale of a mother's courage touched your heart, don't miss more inspiring wildlife stories. Subscribe to our Nature's Chronicles newsletter for weekly narratives that showcase the extraordinary bonds between animals, their incredible survival instincts, and heartwarming encounters in the wild.